to Reclaiming America. I'm Greta, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Dan and Bill. And I would love to tell you, I am telling you, this is great stuff, that Congressman Dan Bishop is with us today. Yes. And I have been waiting for this moment for a long time. Congressman Bishop is a member of the House Freedom Caucus, member of the Committee on the Weaponization of Government, all kinds of good things. But the bigger news is that he is running for the North Carolina Attorney General, and being like we're in North Carolina right now.
Kind of
we are.
Thing.
We need him bad. Okay. So welcome.
Let me bring him on. There we go. Hello, Mr. Bishop.
Hi, guys. Glad to be with you. I got a little fog in the throat from recovering from a cold, but I sound a lot better today than I did yesterday, so we'll muddle through, I believe. Good to be with you guys.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Why don't we start out by asking you to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and your history?
Glad to do that. I've been a North Carolinian my whole life, lived in Charlotte basically all my life until the last couple of years. Have been a practicing business lawyer for 29 years. And toward the end of that time, well, I guess I should say politically active as a conservative Republican for many of those years. In 2004 to 8, I was a county commissioner in Mecklenburg County. In 2000, and frankly, I didn't think I wanted to do any more politics after that. It was rough in a blue county to be on a minority of a board as they made Democrats made bad decisions. But I was out for about 6 years, came back and ran for the North Carolina House in 2014, was elected, served one term there, was elected to the United States, the North Carolina Senate in 2016 and 18. And then some folks may remember that in 2018, the congressional race in the 9th district at that time, which stretched from eastern part of Mecklenburg County down to Bladen County, featured after the race was won by Mark Harris, the State Board of Elections under Democrat control decided that some fairly minor illegal ballot harvesting by a contractor, a field worker of Mark Harris's, warranted setting aside his victory and calling a special election. Mark decided not to run because he had been through the ringer. And I ran in 2019 in a special election for Congress, was elected, was reelected in 2020, 2022. And so I've served in Congress almost 5 years now. And that's about it.
It's a lot, though.
Hey, you've seen an awful lot in those 5 years.
It is testament to, if you're a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ, that God has his hand on you and will direct your path. I certainly have had no pre-existing plan to go to Congress. In fact, I had thought my run in the legislature was probably nearing being done. My wife looked at me in the December between that election, that November election, re-election to the state Senate, and the February time I jumped into the special election for Congress. But in December, in the middle of that, she said, I think that's the last election. But Lord had different plans, and we acceded to those. So here I am.
Looks like he's been with you and guiding you. So let's just keep it working.
No doubt about it.
Attorney General.
Say it again.
Why running for Attorney General and not Congress?
So it would be the easiest thing in the world to do, to return to Congress. I could sit there another 5 or 10 years. Frankly, Congress, I have found, is in a status quo that is almost unbreakable. It needs to break because Republicans have to accomplish things for the American people that, frankly, are not getting done. And my view is that Republicans haven't been tough enough, too preoccupied with getting reelected, too preoccupied with not rocking the boat or trying to prove we can, quote, govern. And what we really need to do, in my view, is to go to the mat for the American people on key issues like an exploding debt and a structural deficit at about $2 trillion, a border that is so out of control that our sovereignty is in jeopardy. But as I say, Congress doesn't seem to be ready to meet those challenges. I think Republicans in Congress are in something of a transition, and it just some recruited me, frankly, but after examining the situation for a while, it became clear to me that the role of state attorneys general nationally and certainly in North Carolina is so potent and such a post from which so much good can be accomplished immediately that it was time to go do it. And Republicans have not been elected to the Attorney General's office in North Carolina since 1896. And that sounds worse than it is. It's just waiting to be taken. And I thought that under the circumstances, I was the candidate who could get the job done.
Well, if I may say so, I wish you were staying in Congress, pardon me, because I love everything you just said, and I completely agree with you. Bill, you're going to be out, and Mr. Bishop is going to be my new co-host because I love what he says compared to what you say. But having said that,
I mean, Attorney General.
Oh, God help us if you were. But that gets to my next question, which is, you talk about you'll be able to do more as Attorney General. I think a lot of people don't really understand what an Attorney General does. So can you talk a little bit about, what you do as an Attorney General or what you would be doing?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. And I mean, to be honest about it, at the very front end, let me say, I think Republicans don't really like lawyers very much. And for good reason. They see lawyers used so aggressively by the left in this country to subvert law and order. The Attorney General in North Carolina is the top law enforcement officer. He has a tremendous role in working together with district attorneys and with frontline law enforcement officers to see to it that the criminal justice infrastructure works effectively. That's job one. Second of all, the Attorney General, I was talking recently to a guy who used to be a United States attorney, the ones that are in the federal system appointed by the president. And he pointed out that state attorneys general really, everybody says they're the top cop in a state, but really they're like the top civil litigator. A lot of what the Attorney General does is supervise lawyers who serve every agency in government, in state government, and every board and every commission. And so you have a tremendous ability to have, to see to it that the law is respected instead of distorted and undermined in various ways. Let me give you a quick example there. Joe and I, my wife Joe and I voted early this year for the primaries, and I had the privilege of turning over my driver's license to verify who I was for the first time. A very simple and logical expedient. Photo ID in voting has been the law in North Carolina. It was enacted by the legislature in North Carolina the first time in 2013, more than a decade ago. It's taken more than a decade for that to ever become implemented, to become effective and be carried out. And during that time, by the way, in 2018, the people of North Carolina adopted it as a state constitutional amendment by an overwhelming margin. And yet it's been litigated for a decade, more than a decade. And during all that time, the Democrat attorneys general in office, first Roy Cooper and then Josh Stein, fought it. They fought the implementation of the law. The attorney general is supposed to be the state's lawyer. His obligation is to defend and protect law and not to attempt to destroy and undermine it. So that's really the second. So again, the first role is that criminal justice, important role in criminal justice, working with the constitutional officers like district attorneys and sheriffs. Second part is to supervise the immense civil legal machinery within state government and see to it that it works right and that it's not subverted in the way I just described. And then finally, there's one other tremendously important aspect, and this has grown enormously over the last 20 reach farther and farther, attempting to stretch their legal authority to do things they can't do. And it's been state attorneys general time and again that have acted to rectify their legal wrongs or in many cases, protect fundamental constitutional rights when they've been trampled upon. The best example, perhaps, is the vax mandate, when the President of the United States used the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, to try to force through employers a mandate for people to be vaccinated. He exceeded his authority in law, and the United States Supreme Court so decided. But that was because state attorneys general brought that issue before them. Many ways that happens too. Many different examples we could talk about, but you can see that it is a multifaceted role, and in some ways it's a more significant role than governor in North Carolina. So it is one that Republicans haven't competed sufficiently well for before now, and we're going to win it this year.
Yes, we are. And we're looking forward to you being sworn in. Not that I'm taking sides.
Tell us how you really feel, Bill.
That's right. We can
Do whatever we want.
And he didn't have an opponent.
We need to have an opponent.
Yes,
so
we
there
can
you
take
go.
sides. I think we're all frozen.
They are. Anyway.
Yeah.
a little bit of a
I was
hiccup.
checking to see if my signal's okay.
There's
I'm
a little
having
bit of a hiccup
garbled
that
audio.
happened there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're good.
Good.
Well, good and rolling on. Good. What role do you see the Attorney General position in dealing with some of the bigger issues that we have in this state? For example, a recent Civitas poll showed that the #1 issue in this state is illegal aliens. How do you get involved in that, and what can you do about it?
It's a great question. And I think I'm going to come right to that. I will say that I believe the #1 impact that an attorney general can have is in the area of election integrity, by seeing to it that the kind of mischief that's gone on in litigation concerning elections is responded to appropriately. But I'm going to come immediately to your point, because I think maybe that may be the next most important thing that an attorney general can do. Among the things that state attorneys general have done, particularly led by Texas and Louisiana, is to contest the illegal actions by the Department of Homeland Security. You know, one of the committees I sit on in Congress is the Committee on Homeland Security. I also sit on the Committee on the Judiciary, which has jurisdiction over immigration law. And so I've had a front seat to watch, excuse me, to watch the ways in which the Secretary of Homeland Security has not merely pursued a different policy than President Trump followed in terms of border administration, but consistently and brazenly defied multiple detention mandates that Congress has enacted that require, in certain circumstances, that people be detained and deported. And it has not been a question of having sufficient resources. He's underutilized his detention resources. He's cut his detainer requests to state agencies that have incarcerated, for example, alien criminals that Congress has mandated be detained, and he's done that consistently. Attorneys general have done that. North Carolina needs to be on the side of the attorneys general who are fighting that kind of lawlessness, not on the side of California and New York and Illinois, jurisdictions that are helping to subvert the rule of law by use of executive power.
You know, that brings up a question that actually I was having a conversation with someone about 2 weeks ago about, and they were talking about how the different states, you know, were backing Texas, sending troops and all of that. And you know, why wasn't North Carolina involved in all that? And where was both the governor, the legislator, but they also did mention, why isn't Josh Stein saying anything about it?
Yeah.
He's been largely quiet about the whole thing. And when he has spoken, it's been, as you said, following the California line, I'll call it.
Right.
How would you address that? How would you answer that person? Like, they're asking, well, how can that be?
It's a good question. One of the things, by the way, that reinforces and encourages me with is that the American people are amazingly well informed. When they talk about that issue about Texas having undertaken to use its own law enforcement, its own means to do what the federal government has failed to do, the constitutional guarantee by the federal government to protect states against invasion. And so they've taken it into their own hands. And that was really the cutting edge of law. You know, exactly. We've never really had that a failure to that degree that would constitute, somebody could argue constitutes an invasion. And Texas has taken certain action. It's under challenge by the Biden administration. So far, the courts have been sort of ping-ponging back and forth in terms of whether Texas can carry that out. That's what state attorneys general are in the middle of right now. That is the bleeding edge issue. And I believe at the end of the day, if that constitutional guarantee, the federal guarantee, is not lived up to, then of course states are sovereign as well, and they have the obligation and the entitlement to defend themselves. So that's the way I hope the Supreme Court of the United States ultimately rules. And I predict if Texas remains or turns out to be finally successful in being allowed to defend its borders, you're going to see action from legislatures in a number of jurisdictions around the country, because here in North Carolina, you talk to DAs and talk to sheriffs, as I am, and they will tell you that the pervasiveness of fentanyl and other drugs on the street, the price of them is in the gutter because the supply is so unbelievably unrestrained, and people are dying because of it. So, state governments have to act if the federal government is so neglectful or reckless, disregardful of its own obligation under our constitutional system. And that's what I'll do as Attorney General. I'll be on that side fighting those leading edge issues.
So let me, this is a question I've had trouble forming, so bear with me. So taking you back to Congress, I think people like me watch the news, I read the news, I see all this crazy stuff going on, right? A lot of us are down here cheering that there is no budget deal. Close the government, right? I mean, we really are. And like, oh, that's fine. Just I've been through government closures.
Me too.
Nobody bled.
Let's all raise our hand here.
Yeah.
Seriously, no, we made it, okay? And
we did well.
But when these things happen, when these things do get passed, where do we as Republicans lose it? How do we let these things happen?
So Greta, I think it's a great question. I've been asking that question the whole time I've been in Congress. I have to say that I think the Republican conference in Congress is in transition. I'm sorry about my cough. And if I could figure out how to mute myself real quickly, I would do that, but I'm too technically deficient. And I think developing the will to face today's left is a work in progress. I really think that's what Donald Trump represents, is someone whose personality is sufficiently tough to face the challenge that we confront. And in Congress, I ask the same question that you do, but I would say we just passed this minibus a couple of weeks ago. $1.2 trillion is the same garbage that we see all the time. We didn't finish the bills that we received commitments we would do, the 13 separate appropriations bills, so that we could examine each one of the spending priorities as we went. And, that's led to fights in Congress, led to fights among Republicans. In North Carolina, there were two members of the House, me and Greg Murphy, and one senator, Senator Budd, who voted no on that minibus. Every other Republican voted for it. So I'd have to say I'm outnumbered. But it does happen that I run into people like you guys everywhere I go who say, I want you to do more of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to fight with other Republicans, by the way. They will say that. And I take responsibility for that. But the problem is, if we're going to be unified, it has to be unity with a purpose. And I just think the American people, you guys, as good examples. I've never met you before. Well, we have met, I think, maybe briefly, but we haven't spent a lot of time together. No. And I run into this all the time, that American people are way ahead of Congress, and they know that Congress has to be tougher. If we are always committed never to see an interruption in funding, in divided government, we're never going to get anything for the conservative point of view. Nothing. It's not that I'm an absolutist. I don't have to have everything. But I do believe we have to have something. I think the call that went around in the last several months is the border's become genuinely frightening in terms as a crisis. You did hear that call coming from people out in the country. Shut her down. Just hold out on the next spending deal until there is some agreement that we're going to address this crisis. Something real, not another thing where they call it bipartisan, but it gives into every Democrat priority, and you can't name a Republican priority that's involved that is in the picture. But something real, something that would dramatically reduce the flow of illegals across the border, and that's been my view. They want to add more money for Ukraine. Ukraine's a complicated picture, but I think the American border, American sovereignty is far more significant as a national issue than solving the problems of Ukraine's conflict with Russia. So that's our next opportunity, and I fear it will be frittered away as well. But I just think the American people have to keep sending tougher people. They got to send Donald Trump back to the White House this fall, and I think they have to set aside discomforts. Or if part of his personality is unappealing to you, I'm sorry, we're just in a time in this country where it's a crisis, it's an existential crisis, and we're going to have to face it with sufficient toughness. I'm confident that there is sufficient toughness in the American people. Why there is so much weakness in the Congress, I cannot account for. A lot of these people are pretty good folks, but there's a fairly small contingent that exercises outsized influence, appropriators, sort of neocons, and they seem to dominate every decision on Capitol Hill, and it needs to stop.
Guess what, guys? It's time for our first break. Time is flying by here, so let's take a short break, and we'll be right back to Reclaiming America.
Welcome back to Reclaiming America. I'm Bill, and I'm here with Dan and Greta. The three of us are having a terrific time, as we usual, Reclaiming America. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have Congressman Dan Bishop, who's running for the state attorney general. And we're having a fascinating conversation about what happens and what should happen and where we go for the future with our country, with our state. And I welcome you back with us, and I'm so glad you're running. And if we could vote now, you'd have my vote, and we can't vote often, but we will vote early.
We only vote once as Republicans. Thanks, Bill.
That's right, but we will vote early. When you talk about, one of the things I found particularly upsetting with the current attorney general is that he picks the laws he likes. I'm not going to enforce this. I'm not going to enforce that. Or I'm going to take a stand absolutely against it and file against the General Assembly. Thoughts and comments on that?
I think that's a terrific question, Bill, and it's very much at the heart of why I'm doing this. What we're seeing with Josh Stein, what we saw with Roy Cooper before, and what the two Democrats who were prominent in the primary and the one who has emerged all say is they have political objectives that they want to accomplish as attorney general. They want to change the law on abortion. The General Assembly has arrived at a 12-week compromise position. They're extremists. They want to have abortions until the moment of birth, maybe after. And some people believe that. I recognize that. But the question is, what does that have to do with the Attorney General's office? The Attorney General is not a policy officer. The Attorney General is obliged at every executive office in our state. Now, the governor has a policy role because he has a veto to exercise, and the Attorney General does not. But his sole responsibility is to execute the laws that are passed by the people's representatives in the legislature. Now, I mean, the fact is that that's like almost quaint to say that these days, because Democrats have long since developed a generalized effort to seize executive power and to use it to nullify law. Now, it's amazing because I always keep hearing how today's Democrats are different than the old Democrats, but that is an odious theory of governance that has a very dark background, nullification, And it has no place in our constitutional system. But so when Josh Stein and Roy Cooper used their office to attempt to invalidate the legislature's enactment of photo ID, as an example I gave, when they attempted to engage in collusive settlements to change the election rules that govern our election in a lot of different ways, when they try to invalidate the General Assembly's 12-week abortion limit, they're trying to serve as a policy counterweight to the elected legislature, and that's not what the job is. But it's the same phenomenon we see elsewhere. It is the same thing when you see in the Soros DA phenomenon. They're electing the person who's responsible for carrying out the prosecution of crimes according to laws passed by the legislature, and they pick people who just say, well, I don't agree these people should be prosecuted, hence I'm not going to. And Soros recognized the opportunity to destroy the rule of law, advance his own view of how things should happen by doing that in a systematic way. It is the same problem I've described in Congress, or that we see in Congress, where the Secretary of Homeland Security confronts laws that Congress has long since passed in the 90s about detention mandates and just says, I'm just going to issue a memorandum that says ignore it. That is an attack on our constitutional system. And its ultimate expression is the Attorney General of the state of New York, the person who ran for that office with the only mission, the only mission that she declared to turn the full resources of that office into the persecution of one political enemy. That is an extraordinary assault on our constitutional system. And sometimes it's frustrating. The Republicans want to play by the rules. Democrats want to undermine the rules, want to cheat under the rules. Well, and in fact, at the same time, the great irony is that Democrats say all the time they're concerned about, quote, our democracy. Well, they're attacking our very constitutional system in the way they attempt to use an office like this. So to your point, Bill, my obligation as Attorney General is to see to it that the reverence for the law is restored. We have in this country a crisis of in our culture of order. Law and order in this moment is like water in the desert, and people are, and it's not just people who are conservative or even moderate or even center right. People of all types, except for a few kind of ideological loons who want to see everything torn asunder and broken down. Almost everybody, suburban moms, don't want to send their children out of the house to go to a concert worried about whether they can come back home alive. And so I am the law and order candidate for Attorney General. And I guarantee you this, you would think that everybody running for Attorney General would say the same thing. I will not face any competition for that claim. My opponent will not be a law and order candidate because they seek to subvert law and order.
You know, you're touching on some of the stuff that I think most Americans are really frustrated with, right? Lawfare, in a manner of speaking, where you see somebody like Letitia James doing what she's doing, you're seeing what's happening in Georgia and all that. As an attorney general and working with other attorneys general, and I don't know the answer to this, that's why I'm asking, do you have the ability to kind of come together as a group and have any effect to prevent that as an attorney general, as opposed to, say, someone in Congress? I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Absolutely. I characterize the state attorneys general as the rear guard. Have you ever heard of that phenomenon? You have the main battle armies on the field, and there's been clashes, and the lines have become disorganized. The one army might be in retreat in certain portions of their line, and they need to have a strategic retreat and reorganize. And the rear guard takes the field and protects the retreating army until it can recover. That's how I see AGs. And there's a Republican Attorneys General Association. By the way, I expect them to take a very substantial role in the campaign, but they have been building and they look to expand the resources of attorneys general who are faithful to the constitutional system and believe it to be the priority to protect the fundamental constitutional rights of people from an overreaching or neglectful federal government, depending on the circumstance. And yeah, that's going to be a big that has grown a lot. Texas and Florida and Louisiana and a number of other states stand out in that area. And I could give you lots of examples, but I look forward to joining them and to being a leader among them. And I think the perspectives that I bring to the campaign and ultimately will bring to the job, having served in the state legislature, having served in local government, and finally having served in Congress, will put me in good stead to have the proper perspectives to bring.
You know, when you start talking about what's been going on, and you brought up Texas and you brought up Florida, I think they've actually illustrated what we really need to do. The only way to affect the left and their policies is to make them taste what they're doing. You know, I think they were brilliant loading up the buses and putting them on the planes and sending them to these sanctuary cities. And all of a sudden, illegal immigration is becoming a national issue because they have to live with it. You know, and I think we need to just understand that and stop playing around and just put it in the other people's face and say, this is what we need to do. If you want to play this game, you got to live what you want us to play with. And I think that's what.
I agree completely, Bill. And if you'll allow me to say it, it prompts me to say this. My general, and we talked earlier about what I've thought should happen in Congress and the fact that that hasn't quite come to hold sway yet. But I believe today, if you look to Florida as an example, and Ron DeSantis' governorship there, but preceded by Rick Scott's good service also. And if you go back to 2000 and think how that state was on a knife's edge, you remember the Bush-Gore presidential election. And now Florida is completely solid as a Republican stronghold. And if you just saw the other day, Ron DeSantis confronted Disney, if you'll recall, and said, you're not going to be able to govern yourself. You're not going to be able to act as the local government in the county where you are situated in your theme park anymore because you've abused the privilege and you've undertaken to try to attack and dominate state government. We're not going to allow that. Well, if you just caught the news this week, Disney has finally backed down and accepted the governor's, you know, the new means of control of that area when they had threatened the governor and said they wouldn't agree. What we have to do, it is my view that if we show the proper resolve, not trying to lick your finger and put it in the wind, and not trying to please the Charlotte Observer and the Raleigh News and Observer and WREL, the lunatics in the legacy media, not afraid of who you are and represent and what you represent. Just be straightforward. Be plain about who you are. Be prepared to be bold in pursuing the values that we know have established the most flourishing society in the history of mankind. We don't have anything to apologize for. We need to reinforce it. And I think that's how Mark Robinson is as a candidate for governor. That's how I'm going to be as a candidate for lieutenant governor. And you can see the record of success when people do that properly. I want to see North Carolina, again, I'm going to follow the law. That's all I have to do in order to accomplish the result I'm about to say. But the result will be to consolidate North Carolina as not a purple state, but an absolutely clear state where common sense prevails, a red state. And in consequence, just like in Florida and in Texas, people will flow there. Their populations will grow. Hopefully you can continue, the people who are leaving disasters created by the left to come there won't keep voting like the places they left, but you'll instead build populations that have successful common sense policy. We'll then build our representation in Congress that is apportioned according to population. We'll build our representation on the Electoral College, and we'll have a more viable path to elect presidents without everything turning on a handful of swing states as they are now. And life will get better in the United States. That's the objective. And it just seems in North Carolina we've had the legislature. Republicans have controlled the legislature for a little better than a decade. In the last two election cycles, Republicans have won, think about this one, 13 straight appellate judgeships on the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court. 13 in a row have been won by Republicans. And that's because the people of North Carolina want law and order. If they think there's law and order involved, they don't want the gamesmanship played by the left. They want law and order Republicans. And that's why we're going to win this race as well. You know, when you hear that it hasn't been won since 1896, you say, wow, I hope we can win, but it sounds like it's too far to be gotten. Let me just say this. In the last cycle, the Republican nominee in 2020, in the third quarter, was able to spend about $300,000. His opponent, Josh Stein, spent $8.7 million. He outspent him 26-1. And here's the punchline. That Republican lost that race by 0.1% of the vote. Fewer than 14,000 votes cast out of 5.5 million. And so that probably right there, more than anything, any other single thing, attracted me to say it's time to leave Congress and win this for the people of North Carolina. And already I've raised more than 50% more than any previous Republican candidate has raised. I'm being outraged because the Democrats are going to keep doing what they do. They spend disproportionately for these positions because they use them to subvert law. And we're going to restore law, but I'm going to win.
And a lot of them are coming from out of state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have a question I want to ask, and I got to be careful how I ask it because it's three old white guys and a young white woman. But I want to kind of go into, and you can answer this both as a congressman and a potential attorney general. What are you hearing from the other side as far as people of color? Like they've been primarily Democrat, but I'm starting to see movement more and more towards the Republican Party. And I think a large part of that reason is what you were just talking about, the law and order side of it. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what you're hearing and what you would do as an attorney general to address their concerns?
I agree with you 100%, Dan. When you think back to the idea of defunding police, that was the most reckless, the stupidest idea ever to venture forth in American political history. Stupidest. And the impact of it was to see thousands more black people killed every year. That's really what happened in consequence of that, because it led to the disregard, the delegitimization of police in cities all over the country led to chaotic conditions that we all have seen. Many of them have manifested themselves in North Carolina. You can think of things that occurred in Raleigh. You can think of Asheville as the absolute basket case. They still are about a third down from full complement in their police force because people aren't willing to be officers if they're going to be disrespected and threatened and stand ready to go to see their lives destroyed anytime they walk into a situation that's volatile, and they know that they're going to be second guessed no matter what they do. The lives that are destroyed by that kind of environment are usually mostly going to be concentrated among those who are least well off, who are most needful of law and order, and who can't protect themselves with their own personal security in gated communities and the like. So, I would also say I'm a big fan of Mark Robinson. I endorsed him out of the gate, and he and I are close friends, frankly. And I know that he is a genuine common sense conservative, and he knows the things I've been speaking of as well. And I'm going to tell you, the one thing I loved about Mark when he appeared in that first video in 2018 when he spoke to the Greensboro City Council, it wasn't so much his Second Amendment message in that video. It was that point in the thing where he said, I'm going to tell you, you guys better start acting on behalf of the majority. And I want to tell you who that is. I'm the majority. So you had a black man standing there describing himself as the majority. And what struck me about it is that's exactly right. And I want to be part of Mark Robinson's new majority. And I believe it's happening. That's what I mean about so much confidence that I have in the American people and in the people of North Carolina. We've had a lot of institutional corruption and craziness, in academia, in media, in cultural, arts out in California, in hell, they're bringing it into the military, big corporations, everything you can name. But it is very hard to subdue a large, free, and armed people. And that is what the American people are. And they're not going to ultimately, we are going to correct our situation. I'm confident. And our first big step in North Carolina is to make it like Florida and Texas. And that's what we're going to do this year.
I can't even argue. You just say it perfectly. The questions that I have a big question for you, which I think we'll do after the break, because I think we're down to about a minute.
Yeah, we can go to, actually, if you want to throw it to break now, Bill, we can go ahead and come back. They'll give us a little bit more
I
time.
think we should break it back because I've got a whole direction. Then we'll take it back to his congressional seat to talk about. Welcome back to Reclaiming America, and we're on the downhill slide of an hour show. It's gone so quickly so far. It's absolutely unbelievable. We have a tremendous guest who is Congressman Dan Bishop, who's running for state attorney general. And if you haven't heard him, you need to. And once you hear him, you got no choice but to vote, pull that line for him, or you've got no brain. So
I want to point out he has the best first name of all, by the way.
I noted that commonality.
The Dan's got to stand together, and we're kind of sort of the members of the Bald Brotherhood also.
Absolutely right. No, there's no doubt about that. We are.
There's an old line about that, which says God made only so many perfect heads, the rest he covered with hair.
Yeah. So, Bill, you said you wanted to take us somewhere before we went to break.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, Congressman, but I am going to ask. We have a situation coming up with control of the House of Representatives again. And my concern goes well beyond whether we keep Johnson or not, because the more we shrink, the more likelihood we're going to turn the House over to the Democrats. And I go to 2024, and if we have a close election and it goes back to the House of Representatives for a decision, that could be a disaster looking for a place to happen.
Bill, I think what you're making reference to, as we passed this minibus the other week, Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a motion to vacate the chair against Speaker Johnson. She did not, by the way, make that a privileged motion, so it doesn't require a vote within 2 legislative days once we're back, as it would have if she had made it privileged. I think the fact that she didn't make it privileged is a sign. Perhaps it was firing a warning shot over the bow. Look, I don't support a motion to vacate the chair against Johnson. There's something, and this is something I didn't support the motion to vacate the chair against McCarthy, although I thought it was a very, very close question. I know there are critics of mine that and others who took the positions that I did at the beginning of Congress, where we held out for 15 rounds before electing Kevin Speaker. But that was for the purpose of and with the result of having achieved an agreement that was historic. Now, I will also concede that in the long run, the way Kevin governed and the way the conference has insisted on acting, it did not accomplish the objectives sought. But that doesn't mean you can fail to attempt some of these things. But you have to be wise and you have to be prudent about it. And so I don't think we go along to get along. I don't think we ought to participate in status quo. I think we ought to continue to hold leadership accountable, and as a means of attempting to hold our fellow Republicans accountable in the conference. But the problem at this point is not Mike Johnson. Much of what he deals with, he has simply inherited, and it's become clear that I don't think the Republican conference is prepared to man up, to use a colloquialism, and do the job it has to do. If I were Mike, I would be more aggressive about putting my speakership on the line to lead the Republican conference to do the right things. But even if he does not, I don't think replacing him is constructive. I don't see how it gets any better by changing out the speaker again. And even though I'm totally dissatisfied with the level of courage of the Republican conference, Donald Trump needs a Republican House. If he has a House led by Hakeem Jeffries, he will be impeached every month or so, regardless of grounds. They'll use it to constantly bedevil him. They've already shown they'll effectively undertake coup attempts to keep him from being able to govern. He's going to have a lot to battle through. That's enough of a reason for people. One thing that I faced, we talked about it, is you got a few swing voters in North Carolina, and you got a few quitters in North Carolina. What I mean by that is people are going to go to the polls because they love Donald Trump, and they're going to vote for Trump, and they're going to turn around and walk back out of the booth. They're not going to vote for anybody else. This is a reason they've got to go down ballot. The race that I've talked about, the opportunity to build North Carolina to be more like Florida and Texas, to build heavyweight states like that, all good-sized states that can affect Congress and the presidential election in future years. And more directly, we've got to keep the House of Representatives. And so we need to send, there's what place we can either pick up 3 seats in North Carolina because of redistricting, or we can pick up 4. And if we can pick up 4, if Republicans will turn out heavily, go vote for President Trump, and then go down ballot and make sure you vote all the way down to the end. That's how we give President Trump what he needs, and that's enough of an argument, I think, this time.
Well, I'm going to do some bragging a bit about Brunswick for just a second.
Wow.
And the lady sitting next to me, Gracie or Greta or something like that. Anyway,
I want to go somewhere if I could, real quick.
You go ahead, go quick, sir.
All right, because we only have about 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll keep it short.
And I think this is something that a lot of people that are listening to this are going to want to find out where you stand on it, as both Congressman and Attorney General to be. The whole TikTok issue. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that, and I will, full disclosure, I got 250,000 followers on TikTok. Okay, I use it every single day and all that. But I also understand the calls for the ban and why they're there. Your opponent really stepped into it, as I'm sure you know, because he had ballpark 2 million followers and then voted to ban it and showed himself for being the hypocrite that he is. I just wanted to get your take, both as a congressman, where you stood on it, but more importantly, I think, how, if you become Attorney General and Congress punts it, like I think they're going to long term, how you would address it as Attorney General. Like, for example, some states are talking about banning it at the state level. Where do you stand on all that? Because that's a big topic out there that a lot of people in the mainstream media aren't touching.
So, Dan, as you said, my opponent in the race for AG, I think he has about 2.5 million, actually had 2.5 million followers. He's lost about 300,000 of them since because he built that massive following in order to build his political career and to raise money for his political career, but then he voted for a ban on it. I have consistently opposed a ban, and I voted against the ban. I'm concerned about the national security implications of TikTok, and as I said, no disrespect to you, I understand why people use it, but I do think when it's on devices, I understand there's security risk. Your data is being potentially at risk not only of being sucked up and provided to a big corporate monster like Facebook or TikTok or X, which is bad enough, or Google, but in fact, it's potentially accessible by the Chinese Communist Party. I think all that is bad, but I am a fundamentalist when it comes to Americans' constitutional rights. It is, and there's an established precedent going back to 1965 called Lamont versus Postmaster General that said American people have a First Amendment right of access to information, even if it is foreign propaganda. And again, as you'll understand, I believe in following the law. I believe that my role, no more important role as Attorney General than to protect the fundamental constitutional rights of the people. And so I'm not going to support a TikTok ban. We could do a lot of other things. We could enact general rules about data privacy. We could enact general rules about prohibiting manipulation by algorithm, by any of the social media platforms. But we can't just say because the information comes from abroad and from an adversary or goes to an adversary from the American people that we can then apply special rules to TikTok. Now, again, that's a question of principle, and it's a big distinction between me and my opponent. I believe in our system. I believe in strengthening and defending our system. He uses it as a political tool, and he'll blow whichever way is necessary in order to give himself a political advantage. And I think that I don't think that, it's sort of a superfluous issue on one level, but a really serious one when you dig into its depth. And he's not if you want to call me, they'd love to say I'm an extremist. All Republicans who get elected or nominated are extremists. I don't mind if you call me an extremist when it comes to defending the First Amendment. I am. That is core to the dignity of every American. It secures all of our other rights. And I will always protect the American people's right to free expression.
I just want you to know I was giving you a standing ovation behind the scenes here.
Dan,
Because
Dan, we're going to touch you. We have another question coming out of here.
So
all right,
Congressman,
you got 3
stop-
minutes, 4 minutes.
Stop talking. Congressman, it's a really question. It's if you would please come see us soon, and especially in September and October, because you'll see your smiling face all over digital billboards around here. And we hope the other counties in 7th District will do the same thing.
Wow. That
We
is
have
marvelous.
Under Greta's leadership, we're going to 6 digital billboards in our county. 2 months going on, so it's 2 months of digital billboards. She's setting the whole thing up, and she's also taking this idea to the rest of 7th District at our convention next month.
It's very effective.
Wow. That is extraordinary to hear. And it prompts me to say this. First of all, thank you. I'm so delighted that that decision has been made. And it is indicative of, when I mentioned that over the last 2 cycles, Republicans have won 13 straight appellate judicial races, that is because the people in the Republican Party in particular became informed about those seats, their importance. The races were run by slate in an intelligent way that didn't put us killing each other, and people got behind it. They got to understand it. You're doing something like that. If that kind of effort grows, and because facing the Democrat lawfare machine, I'm going to do everything I possibly can. They will not outwork me, and we're doing well, raising money and the like. But unless I have Republicans, not just Republicans, but people who, again, as I said, who are way ahead of Congress, who know what is going on, who are keeping up with the bleeding edge, they know what is happening. If they step in and say, we're going to win this race because we need to change our state, and you do extraordinary things like that, I can't tell you what a lift it is, because I know that's what leads to victory. So God bless you for that effort. That's fantastic. I look forward to getting down there and seeing what you've done.
Thank you so much. Well,
Yeah, and you go beyond that with us. We're doing the traditional door knocking, the traditional phone call making. We're putting out 4x8 signs with Republican philosophies on against the billboard, so we have it all over the county. And we're also starting a new initiative this year under some auspices coming from other areas to reach out for faith-based voters, because we have a large amount of faith-based voters that are not voting, and we need to get them involved.
I've heard that, Bill, and I look forward to hearing more about that as well. I know there are some important initiatives out there in that area too. So thank you guys very much for caring and for being involved, and to seeing to it that your state and your country goes the way it needs to preserve it for our kids and our grandkids.
It is easy to do what we have to do to support candidates of your caliber.
it is.
Thank you both very much. Thank all of you.
Thank you. Okay, Dan?
Dan, are you with me?
It's time to wrap it up, kids. So why don't we give the congressman a couple of minutes to say whatever you would like to say to all of our listeners and all the voters out there.
Got it. Sounds good.
Thank you, guys. Look, it's been a pleasure having the chance to converse with you, and I think we understand each other very well. The opportunity that is before us in the Attorney General's race is I think it's an example, personally for me and for Republicans across North Carolina, I hope of a new emerging day. You're talking about what you're making an effort to do, with this. You've obviously expended funds. You've got a plan. You're going to use digital media, outdoor media, in order to advance a message, because you've decided you've got to be involved. Same deal on my end. As I said, I could waltz back into Congress. I could do what congressmen have done too often and sit there when we're not really getting the job done. I really can't change that dynamic directly. I could sit there and waste the next 5 or 10 years doing that. I'm taking a risk instead. But I know that 0.1% loss that we had in the 2020 cycle is ripe to be reversed. I know that the AG's position in North Carolina, as I said, might be more important than governor. It's essential to have Mark Robinson with a sidekick who can see to it that the lawfare guys don't bury him in process. And if Mark Robinson should by any chance not prevail, the attorney general needs to be up in the grill of the Democrat who wants to engage in lawfare and prompt that sort of, anti-legislature mechanism here in North Carolina. So we have a great opportunity before us. And if people will learn about and support and spread the word about the opportunity to win the attorney general's office for the first time since 1896, in the same way they grasped and pursued the election of those appellate judges in North Carolina, we'll have not just the legislature that is solid and conservative and common sense, not just the best constitutionalist Supreme Court, state Supreme Court in the country, but also an executive branch that's been galvanized under common sense, promotes people's safety, the safety of their family, their businesses, and their livelihood. So that's enough of a reason to go and win. I look forward to winning with all of you.
That's awesome.
And we want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And please don't be a stranger. Something you want to talk, you can put us on, come back on the show. You can come down to the area. We'd be glad to have you and show you around.
Absolutely.
Look forward to being with you again soon. Thanks, guys, very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, Bill.
Dan, why don't you tell them where we can find all these?
He beat me to it. So every week, Congressman, we go through this battle on who's going to name where they can find us. So I'll do it this week. Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, that thing that he voted to keep going. What did I forget? Rumble and Instagram. No, not Instagram. What else are we, Bill? I lost one.
Facebook.
That's
Facebook.
Facebook. So, yeah, check us out on all them. Give us the thumbs up, give us the like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Wrap it up there, Billy.
Thanks, everybody, for watching Reclaiming America. And we'll be back next week with another show where you can hear Greta, me, and the old guy over there with the mic